both new and old. The Gospel of the Lord. Saint Jerome, as we all know, a father of the Latin Church, incredible saint in fact, born in Strido in Dalmatia. We believe he was born in 340 and died in 420. He studied in Rome and was baptized there. He was attracted by the ascetic life and traveled to the east, where he was unwillingly ordained a priest. He was recalled to Rome to act as secretary to Pope Damasus, but on the Pope's death he returned to the east, to Bethlehem, where with the aid of Saint Paula and others he founded a monastery, a hospice and a school, and settled down to the most important work of his life, the translation of the Bible into Latin, a translation which, in some revisions, is still in use today. He wrote many works of his own, including letters and commentaries on sacred scripture. When a time of troubles came upon the world, through barbarian invasions and to the church, through internal dissension, he helped the refugees and those in need. He died at Bethlehem. Let us invoke his wisdom and his intercession today in the church and the current crises that we face, that we would have the same perseverance. As you know, over the last few weeks I've been working through a number of topics related to the crises that we've faced in recent times, all centered around the COVID virus. And we've been working through the different ways and the different responsibilities we have to live our faith in these times. And not yesterday we looked at the guardian angels, the archangels I should say. Today and the day before that I should say, we continue to look at the different ways in which one can cooperate in the sin of another, what is allowed and what is not allowed from a Catholic moral perspective. When someone is committing a sin or doing an evil act, we can obviously agree with such things, and that would be seriously wrong. And we call that formal cooperation, as I'm sure we all know. I've mentioned it before. So if someone was determined to have an abortion, and we as a Catholic agreed with them, and there are Catholics that do this, yes, we would be formally guilty of agreement in the sin of whatever kind, whether we've praised them or advised them or counseled them or remained silent when we should have opposed it. There, if we have an interior agreement with the sin, then we are formally cooperating and we are guilty for the sin to almost the same level as the person committing it. And there we have always a serious responsibility, duty on our shoulders as Catholics, obligation indeed, to not assist people and to try to help them away from sin. As you know, I've been building up over the last number of weeks to show that we're in a world of sin and we are not to be of it. And there are certain types of cooperation in the evil of the world that we cannot avoid. Whether it's just the interconnectivity of being that has fallen, whether it is in a culture that is enmeshed in so many errors and sinful ways, or whether it is now because of the globalization and the way that our economy and our modern life works, there are just so many things that we cannot avoid in terms of cooperation and sin. But clearly we can never formally agree with such sins. And then the church, as you know well, and I'm repeating this deliberately, I know I've said it before, but I'm repeating it so that we're clear on it, that it makes a certain impression upon us and so that we remember it. Then, if we are not to agree with a sin, there can be ways in which we materially cooperate in sin. And there can be allowable ways and non-allowable ways when it comes to a Catholic. If we provide any material assistance directly in the performance, the action of a sin, then yes, we are guilty in that kind of material assistance, and that is something that is prohibited to us as Catholics. An example would be, just like I was saying, someone wants to get an abortion and we drive them to the clinic, or we pay for the abortion. Any kind of serious sin, and even a lesser sin, if we directly assist in the sin to such a level that the sin would not occur without our assistance, we are providing what we call immediate material cooperation in the sin, something that we would be sinfully guilty for and we should go to confession for. Then the Church makes another distinction between, when we're speaking of material cooperation of sin, she makes a distinction between what I have just described, which is immediate material cooperation, and another thing called mediate, secondary material cooperation. And that is where we are benefiting in some way, in a secondary way, whether it's by goods or by other things that we might receive from the sinful act. And we can do so in a proximate way or a remote way. If we were to proximately, mediately, materially cooperate in a sin, it would be, for example, like knowingly receiving stolen goods. We know someone has committed a sin and we have not provided the materials for the committing of that sin, but we are willing to benefit from that sin by receiving the stolen goods in a secondary way. That also is forbidden to us. And that can play out in many different ways. You might find someone who works for a company that they know is directly doing sinful things, and thereby working for the company, they might, in a very proximate way, benefit from the sin and providing or doing work in the tasks that they normally do in their ordinary life, which facilitate the sins in a secondary way. So they may not be directly committing the sins or materially providing the material by which the sins are committing, but they're doing secondary tasks that benefit from the sin. They're being paid for those tasks in a proximate way. So for example, on that kind of matter, someone who works for an abortion clinic but is not directly involved in the abortion in the theatre like a nurse would be, but does administration work in an abortion clinic. And there they might think, I disagree with the abortions, I do not agree, and I'm not providing the materials, I'm not handing the doctor the instruments or setting up the theatre for the abortion, but they are at a secondary level recording some of the details of the abortions and working there. They are mediately, materially, proximately cooperating in an intrinsic evil of a very serious kind, and that also is forbidden to us, to be directly involved in those things. And normally, yes, we would also be forbidden from remotely cooperating in such things. So for example, and this is the next distinction, material, mediate, proximate or remote, and when we're looking at remote, mediate, material cooperation in sin, it would be like an administrator working in a hospital where abortions are performed in the bottom floor, but most of the work of the hospital is for the benefit of the health of people. And someone is doing administration, most of their work is for all the other good things, and there might be some minor way in which they record the number of abortions in their administration work. That is what we call remote mediate material cooperation. And that is allowed in Catholic life when there are other goods to be achieved, and it's through the principle of double effect. I'm doing a good thing, my work, there are many good effects of that, and I tolerate that there will be some side effects of my work at a remote level that cooperate in evil. And there that goes on, my brothers and sisters, all the time today in our Catholic life. We are, in fact, in our culture, remotely, mediately, materially cooperating in intrinsic sin every day of our life. When we pay our taxes, for example, and I worked through that example the other day. Let me give you a number of examples of how we are cooperating every day of this kind of particular ways in sin. When I purchase anything from China, because China, in its dictatorship and its one-child policy and in the extraordinary level of abortion that it performs, anything that I purchase from China, then I am remotely, immediately, materially cooperating in the intrinsic abortion evil, as well as many other evils, the oppression of peoples and minorities in China, any other taking away of human rights in a serious way in China. When I purchase from a company that works there directly on the internet, I am cooperating in the evils of what that dictatorship does. And yet we seem to do it all the time. And we might even be buying through another mechanism, a business that works with China like Amazon or so many other things. So many of our Catholic books are printed in China that we buy even in the ordinary parish. When we look inside and we'll see printed in China, there we are remotely, immediately, materially cooperating in the evil of that evil regime. And yet the church does not bring out a document and say we must stop this. When we use Facebook and all of the ways that Facebook is perpetrating evil in the world, or the internet itself and all the pornography that's on the internet, when we use the internet, we are remotely, immediately, materially cooperating in the intrinsic evil of pornography, whether we like it or not. And there, no one in the church at the highest level in any official document or any moral theologian has ever come out and said we must stop using the internet because of this. When we work with a company that might donate to Planned Parenthood or pharmacies that sell contraceptives or businesses which sell pornography or businesses which fund pornography, and there are many businesses that do so, ordinary businesses. I remember seeing a documentary where they showed that Ford Motors and Coca-Cola and many of those ordinary mainstream food services around the world, enormous conglomerates, actually have shares in pornographic companies. And yet we buy from them with a clear conscience all the time. Not necessarily with a clear conscience, but we know that there are just ordinary transactions we do in our daily life where we cannot avoid such things. Then it might be businesses today who explicitly sign up to the rainbow tick, and so many businesses, all the banks are in this now, and they are pushing their woke ideology through all their different policies within the banking systems. If we were to remove ourselves from this kind of remote, immediate, material cooperation and intrinsic evil, we would have to cease every transaction that we do at a material level, at a financial level in the world, go and live on a farm and not use any services that come to us through the global economy, which is clearly not what is being asked of us by God and by the church and by any serious people in the church who understand these things well. And my brothers and sisters, the reason I'm saying these things is so that we realize that when it comes to the principle of double effect, which is how we engage in all of these things, we're doing good things, and they are the good things that we are searching for when we give money to these particular companies, and we are tolerating the evil effects that they might be involved in. It shows that in the principle of double effect, I am not called to go around in my entire life and try to remove everything that may be not essential. So sometimes people make the distinction, we can only employ the principle of double effect for the most essential things, and if we can avoid it, we must remove everything in our life that's non-essential. But yet the church in her teaching has never asked us to do such a thing, because she realizes, especially in the modern culture, there's no way to avoid these cooperations at these levels. And I'm building up to show why it is that if we were to say that we must avoid certain medicines in the modern context because of their abortion taintedness, then we must remove all these other cooperations in our Catholic life, if we are to be consistent and have integrity in the way that we operate. And further, if these kinds of cooperations in our ordinary daily life, remote, immediate, material, if they contaminate us and make us guilty in terms of our cooperation, and thereby receiving a vaccine that has been tainted by abortion cooperation taints us, then we must refuse cooperation with anybody who has been tainted by the vaccine. And thereby, to put it practically for you, you must then refuse the sacraments from someone who's received a vaccine that has been tainted by abortion cooperation. That's how far it goes, because it's at the level of the choice. And I will go through this in great detail in the next few days to show that if we are to be consistent and think that it's sinful to take such a vaccine on those grounds, then we must also think it's sinful to receive the sacraments from a priest who's also been tainted on those grounds. That's how absurd it becomes. It reduces itself to an absurd position. And unfortunately, I'm having to say these things because there are priests, and even good priests, who have made serious errors in these regards and taught people erroneous things and led them into extreme qualms of conscience that caused them deep concern and distress, when really we should have been looking at this very carefully last year, and it would have been helpful, and I will finish here, would have been very helpful if we'd had greater light on these matters from the top of the church and other levels just below that to help Catholics be in peace in their discernment last year. I'm not talking about the safety, efficacy, and necessity of the vaccine. That is a whole other medical question that can be debated, and we all know that, I'm sure. When it comes to the abortion taintedness of the vaccine, it was very clear in the end, and the church was very clear, has been very clear, under popes like Benedict XVI, John Paul I, Paul VI, Pius XII. And if we disagree with them, then there might be an issue that we have in our Catholic faith. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.